Because fundamentally, our output is a series of instructions. Like a building is not, an architectural output ultimately is nothing but a series of construction documents that are legible only to a small group of people who can build a building. The people who are paying for it, who are going to be in it, those drawings have no meaning. So the challenge to us is, how do you bring to life the experience, the intent of the experience a couple of years before they're there? And that experience isn't only, this is what it will look like. The experience is, what will it feel like? Right? And that's where story comes in. Story becomes the way by which you can unpack the feeling of the space.
Welcome to the Intangible Brand, where we explore the connection between employee experience and client experience and the hidden forces that make brands stick. I'm Jerry Gennaria, and I'm excited to be co-hosting this episode with Julie Hammond, our marketing manager here at Toki. Today, we're joined by Danny Forster. Danny has made a career out of the idea that architecture is really about communication, how spaces tell stories, how they shape culture, how they build identity from the inside out. And as the founder of Danny Forster and Architecture, he's led projects for Marriott, he's master planned chunks of downtown Charlotte, and he's renovated Taylor Swift's penthouse. He's also an Emmy-winning TV host, a former Harvard professor, a TED Talk speaker, and one of the most compelling voices in modular design today, which is how I got connected with Danny through some work that we've done with a mutual client. So Danny, welcome to the Intangible Brand. We're so excited to have you as part of this conversation.
Thank you. That was a lovely intro, not since my bar mitzvah speech did I get such a rousing introduction. So thank you for that.
Awesome.
Well, let's get started with some context. Can you walk us through a day in the life as founder of Danny Forster and Architecture, the path that led you to where you are, and just what excites you?
Sure. Yeah, I think I often have to acknowledge the somewhat non-linear and somewhat circuitous path to kind of where I am. I'm an architect by training and practice, certainly, and I've also spent a lot of time in the TV world, and none of that was necessarily part of a grand master plan. I mean, I studied architectural history and architectural theory in college, and that was largely because I was really moved by a teacher in high school who told me I was not a great student, and she showed us, great churches and great buildings in Europe, and someone who didn't necessarily get my arms around history, I was able to sort of understand the context of stories through the lens of the built environment. It wasn't that it was better or worse than anything else. It just happened to be the doorway that made sense for my brain to unpack the broader narratives of history or the tides of politics or what have you. You think of Renaissance Rome and you see these incredible buildings that the Medici family built. Well, this is just a banking family, but obviously this is much more than just a banking family, right? You see the influence on politics and culture and religion through the investment of infrastructure. So long story short, I did a startup after college because it was the year 2000 and that's what people were doing. It was the dot-com boom, and we had an interesting idea. We had been kind of screwed over by our real estate broker, and we said to ourselves, there's got to be a better way to find homes. And so a buddy of mine and I was able to raise a bit of capital and did a startup, not knowing much about technology, but just feeling like there was something didn't work right and something should work better. Having exited that company, I had that kind of what do I want to do next moment. And I'd always loved studying about architecture. I'd never done any of it. Wasn't a kid who drew necessarily, but there was a part of me that just sort of felt maybe entrepreneurialism and art history. Maybe there's a world in which architecture is that perfect nexus of these things that I like and loved previously. Like, candidly, that was a ridiculous life decision based upon very, very little context. I had never met an architect. I had never interned in an architecture firm. My family didn't know. My dad was a neurologist. My mother was a nurse.
Wow.
I had just no context for what the career of architecture, the practice of architecture was.
Yeah.
But for better, for worse, I was like, okay, so you got to take a GRE and you got to study and figure this out. And I applied and ended up getting into all of these amazing graduate schools. And, as someone, especially with kind of an immigrant father, kind of guy done good, made it to Brooklyn, then made it to a house in New Jersey with the front lawn. If you tell your family you got into Harvard and Columbia and Yale and Penn and all these fancy places, whether or not you know what you're going to do, it seemed like a good thing to do because it's
Right,
shiny and
right.
fancy and
Yeah.
impressive. So even though I went and visited Harvard and was like, oh man, that seems like a really intense and competitive place that's going to crush my soul and spirit, I was like, well, it's Harvard. So I went. And I,
Mhm.
and, I say that admittedly just to kind of like, take accountability for not necessarily like following like my heart necessarily, but candidly following a lot of the programming and a lot of the sort of familial background that informs all of our lives. And I went and got, a really rude awakening in what it is to work to study at the very highest level, the kind of most intense,
Yeah.
most competitive environment, and be trained in the practice of architecture, which ironically had not a lot to do with what we were learning in school, didn't necessarily connect to even the practice of architecture as a career. It was a very theoretical, very academic environment. And I found myself both, blown away, but also a little bit lost,
Mm.
feeling like, oh, good God, what did I just do? I'm like, I think $250,000 in debt,
Oh.
2, 3 years into a career that I don't know if I fully understood. I would say struggling under the weight of what also I think was the lifestyle, which was like intense all nighters and the Socratic method.
Mhm.
Your reviews weren't an acknowledgement of what went right; they were just identifying what was wrong, and it's from
Mm.
that you can get better, right? But that
Mhm.
continuous improvement model, for year after year, can really chip away at your soul. And so, to sort of get to where this Act Three turn happens for reasons that's hard to even imagine, I was trying to do my thesis. I felt kind of lost and really unable to turn my focus to what I cared about because your thesis is actually the point at which your personal voice now comes through. You've
Mhm.
been
Right.
trained by the institution. Now take those skills and put your voice to it. And I couldn't find my voice.
Mm.
And I was sitting there trying to figure out what to do for my thesis. And my girlfriend at the time sent me an ad from what was then the website called Craigslist,
Yeah.
which is where you, at least back in the day, would like sell
Yeah.
furniture, get internships, rent the car, whatever. And there was an ad that said, "Do you like architecture? Can you talk about it? Do you want a TV show? Send us a tape." And
Oh,
if you're
I
that
love
desperate,
that.
right, and you're that kind of lost, at the time it was before the iPhone even. So I had a Canon ELPH, which was like a
Mhm.
little
Oh
Yeah.
three
gosh.
megapixel camera. It had a movie function for 3 minutes, and so in my living room, like unshowered, hair a mess, oily grad student, super exhausted, I made my pitch to the camera, and I think it said something to the effect of like, "I'm $250,000 in debt. I just found out what a first year architect makes. I love architecture. My girlfriend doesn't. I found a way to make her love architecture. I'd like a TV show, please."
Oh,
And I got a TV show. And so no, and so
wow.
I literally, it turns out that ad was from a production company that was located in Cambridge, where I was in grad school. And they were producing a show at the time called Extreme Engineering, which
Mhm.
was a documentary about big buildings and such. And
Mhm.
they wanted to say, instead of that voice of God narrator, what would it be like to put someone in the mix? And so I was asked to host 6 episodes of Extreme Engineering. I left school, literally
Wow.
walked out of my thesis. I quit school. I went and shot these episodes. Um, came begged to come back so I could actually finish my thesis because otherwise, at the time, my mother was sobbing that I'd thrown away my Harvard degree. And I finished school, and I guess I was like, okay, well, that was a fun experience. I guess I'll get back to figuring out what a career in architecture looks like. And I got a call actually like days after graduating. And they said, this thing's a hit. We're going to give you your own show. It's going to be called Build It Bigger. Can you be in a plane in 2 weeks?
Mhm.
And that started, near to a decade's worth of flying around the world,
Wow.
becoming a host and a filmmaker. And then while all that was happening, while I never went the traditional route of working in architecture and working at a firm per se, I started working and
Mhm.
learning the craft and starting a practice. And then ultimately, as the travel quieted down a little bit, I started a practice. And I got to kind of go from telling stories about other people's buildings to developing my own and designing my own. And now the firm lives as a vibrant, kind of interesting architecture practice, interiors practice, design practice that also happens to have a film apparatus. So we're still, in fact, I'm coming to you from Minneapolis, Minnesota, because I'm at a shoot right now, and we're about to finalize an agreement to go to Azerbaijan to do a documentary about a very big building there.
Mm.
And we're you know building buildings and designing homes and designing a bunch of stuff every day. So in a weird way, this kind of like meandering, ridiculous, nonlinear, very lucky path has now landed in a sort of functioning company that operates in creating architecture and telling stories about architecture and unpacking it, whether it's a film, whether it's a book, whether it's through R&D or whether it's through a construction document or a rendering. That's sort of what we do, and we've brought those experiences and skills to bear in a company. Doesn't make it a particularly straightforward business to run by any means,
Yeah.
but that's kind of how we got here anyway, to where I'm chatting with you guys today.
Yeah. So
Wow.
let's talk about the business for just a second.
Sure.
You describe the firm as a consortium of architects, designers, urbanists, filmmakers, storytellers, technologists, curators, professors, and authors. And that sounds a bit more like a brand statement than an org chart. So you've talked about this being a meandering path. Was there some intentionality behind the group of people that you brought together, or is that really an identity that kind of emerged because of the people you kept wanting to bring into the room?
It's a good question. I mean, I don't know if it's an identity or a series of core competencies required to execute the tasks that we find compelling. I
Mm,
mean, like
yeah,
if we want to make films, we have to have people who have the capacity to edit them and to work in that medium. If we want to make buildings, we have to have technical architects who can execute at that scale. If we want
Right.
to do interiors work where we control the project from kind of cradle to grave, we have to have people who can design interiors, design furniture, curate, collect, procure art and curate a collection. And so I don't know if it's particularly efficient to try and do all those things and try and do them at a relatively high level, but at least based upon like my interests and what and the opportunities that have been availed to me, like when our shared client, when we had this opportunity to take some of our work and transform it into a really significant R&D effort, a
right,
multi-year R&D exercise, you have to have people who are going to be able to be practicing in the technology space where we're going to be dealing with fabrication, automated equipment, dealing with software development.
right,
Like those, if you want to work at an industrial scale and do R&D that's going to have kind of long-standing impacts on how buildings get built, not just the design of a building, but how buildings get built, then you have to have people in the organization who can play in that space. So, I- you know, as you read it off, I kind of like, I cringe a little. It feels a bit pretentious, but I do feel like if you need to publish white papers, you must have people who are writers.
Right.
right.
Uh, that we didn't. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like we've at Toki we work with a lot of architecture firms, and they do a lot of architecture, designing buildings, designing interiors, what have you. And obviously, you and your team do the same thing, but it sounds like the sort of the intersection of these different interests that you have is leading in a slightly different place, right? You're telling stories about buildings, right? You're advocating for the built environment, you're explaining the built environment, you're doing the work. eh, Partially, I'm imagining, and I'm putting words in your mouth that I'm hoping you're going to correct here in a second, but I imagine that part of that is it's the experience of building that ultimately helps you think about, one, how do you tell the stories, but also how do you influence the way the work is done? And that's sort of a little bit different than a traditional architecture firm that is interested in doing the work. Yes, you're doing the work, but you're also doing something maybe bigger
Yeah.
or alongside doing the work. Is that
Well,
fair?
Is just in fairness to all architects who don't do these other things,
Right,
they have a series of motivations that drive the work other than just let's make this office building as good as possible, let's make this museum as good as possible. One imagines, there are always a series of internal priorities that are separate and apart from the project. And that firms have an ethos that they're working towards a thing other than just I make buildings, right? Lawmakers don't get elected to pass bills, they do so with an agenda, right?
right,
I would just say that our agenda, to be a little bit, specific about it, happens to come largely from a communication lens.
hmm
That
hmm
we happen to think buildings ought to be didactic, that they should be understandable to those who use them, and they should tell a story beyond just this is a dentist's office and that's where you get your teeth cleaned.
Right. Right.
Buildings want to be about more than just what they do. I hope that that's kind of where buildings and architecture separate from each other. And architecture does a little more than just pure functionality. I think from a process, from an operative standpoint, it definitely drives how we work because that core idea, the diagram we'll talk about in the office, but like, what is this project about? What are we
Hmm.
trying to accomplish? What's the sort of thesis of this project? How is it well defined so it can be stated in a couple of sentences understood by us and the clients? And how do we protect that thesis so it's showing up in the work,
Mm.
in the broad planning, in the details, in the execution, in the color palette, in the material solution? So I also think that this like belief that the project has to communicate clearly also just becomes an operative model within the practice, because when we're making a decision to go left or right, we can refer back to the diagram and say, like, is this in service of the diagram? Does this make the building that much clearer, that much more comprehensible to our clients?
Hmm.
If it doesn't, if it's complexity for complexity's sake, if it's some formal thing that we think looks cool, then that chances are it's probably not reinforcing the diagram and supporting the narrative of the project. I don't know if that's unique to our firm versus other architecture firms. I would say that we are really serious about it.
Sure.
And if the project isn't doing that, then we're doing something wrong.
Right.
And I would say that also, maybe from the communication narrative sort of storytelling side, I'd like to think our clients are seldom in receipt of a design, but they are really with us in the driver's seat, participating in the process. Like, we're very open book.
Hmm.
The clients see the model, like they see the sort of digital options being kind of shown to them in real time. Some architects can be very controlling, showing the clients kind of only the right direction where they need to go. We tend to enlist them in the process in a way that can sometimes backfire, to be frank. But I think gives them ownership. Like, one of the things that we do, it's a small anecdote, but like, everything that we do, any option, every scheme, every kind of way we're trying to solve something is named,
Hmm.
meaning it has a name that the clients can get their head around. Like,
Okay.
this is about a weave. This is about an intersection. This is about whatever it is, but that, like, the intention and the intention of the architecture is given some coded language that outsiders have a doorway into. In the same way that, like, I guess, the buildings became a gateway for me to understand kind of history and politics. I want my clients to get, like, we don't show floor plans to clients. What are they going to do? It's like
Mhm.
showing stereo instructions. There's no feedback a client's going to give me from looking at a construction document that's going to help the building. No
Hmm.
meaning to that. God bless it if they can read a plan, but like, I literally had a client last night. We sent a big construction document set out, and we CC the client out of respect. It's going
Right.
to the contractor, but I CC the client so that, frankly, they see that, like, we met the deadline. We sent it out when we said we would. And she called me and she said, "Is this something I'm supposed to understand?" And I said, "Absolutely not. I just wanted you to know we sent it out on Thursday night, right?"
Yep.
I'd rather walk them into the space.
Hmm.
I'd rather tell them the story of the space.
Yeah.
I'd rather tell them the intention of how I want them to feel in the space. Like,
Right.
I've said this like once, that like, the worst thing someone can say is like, "Hey, can you move that wall a couple inches?" And it's like, what do you know about walls?
Hmm.
Tell me how you want the space to feel, and then I
Right,
will move the
right.
wall appropriately to produce that emotional perceptual impact, right? But
Mhm.
like, I don't want to talk to you about wall locations and dimensions, because that's not what you do.
Right.
Like, I don't talk to my cardiologist about valves. I tell them I want to, like, live and breathe and be able to go running, right? They'll
Right.
figure out the valve on my behalf. Um, yeah, but so I want them to be participants, but I don't want them to be actually having to play architect with us.
Right. How
So
does
it
the
seems like you treat the building as like a living, breathing entity.
Yeah.
Like it's telling the story with you, and it's part of you, part of the client.
Yeah, and I think, and I hope a good designer too, as you're designing the project, you're also not so beholden to your ideas that you don't let the building start talking back to you. Because
Mhm.
oftentimes during the design process, we will do things that will start telling us, "Oh, actually, we were wrong. It needs to actually
Mhm.
move in this direction." And being open enough, and I would say flexible enough with your own ideas to say, like,
Right.
"Oh, the design has evolved. We've
Hmm.
discovered something," because we don't know the answer. We're not. I didn't grow up drawing, right?
Right.
So if someone says to me, "Design a building," I have no idea what the building's going to look like. Partially because I'm incapable of drawing, so I can't render the building. But I actually don't have anything in my mind's eye. I have an approach. I have a process that we're going to go through together. We're going to arrive somewhere. But I
Hmm.
have complete candor when I say I have no idea where we're going to end up. We're going to take a series of inputs. We're going to go on a very specific process. We're going to arrive somewhere amazing. But I don't want to put my thumb on the scale mid swing. I want to let the process reveal itself to me. I want to
Yeah.
stay honest to my diagram. I want to make sure the building tells a story, but I don't know what it's going to look like.
I've
Wow.
heard writers talk about the character talking to them or telling them kind of what is going to happen next in the story. It sounds
1000%. Yeah, I mean, like I think about like there are certain architects, whether it's like Frank Gehry, who you know, or Zaha Hadid.
Right.
There are certain generational kind of artistic talents that have such conviction behind their posture, behind their aesthetic expression, that in fact every building is an expression of that point of view. And the best thing to do is get the client out of the way so they can express themselves, right?
Hmm.
And then I think about movies like a Wes Anderson movie.
Right.
Regardless of what Wes Anderson movie you see, it is a Wes Anderson movie, from the
Right.
framing to the production design to the tonality of the actors. It's a Wes Anderson movie. Yorgos Lanthimos, the guy who just did Begonia or The Lobster or
Right.
Killing of the Sacred Deer. You watch a Yorgos Lanthimos movie, it is the universe of his mind brought to life, no matter what the subject matter is.
Right.
But if you look at like David Fincher or Christopher Nolan, right? These
Mhm.
guys, these amazing filmmakers, like you probably can see their fingerprints on these different movies, but that's a process. That's an
Mhm.
approach that might be similar, but they don't look the same, right?
Right.
Right.
They
Yeah.
don't. My sense would be, I don't want to speak on behalf of these geniuses, but my sense is they have a point of view on the experience of filmmaking, not
Mhm.
necessarily on the aesthetics of filmmaking. I would say we're very similar in that respect. I don't
Mhm.
Mhm.
think I know the answer, nor do I think my aesthetic proclivities are that valuable. I'm not that interested in them. I don't even think they're that well developed, to be honest with you. Like, I don't have the best taste in the world. I don't have the best formal sophistication in the world, but I do have a really, really good a sense of process,
Mhm.
and I think I have a really, really good sense of legibility.
Mhm.
If the design can speak to those who are not necessarily trained.
Does it take a
Right.
certain kind of client to work with to get the best out of that process?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the, you know, I think like, yeah, I think the clients who are willing to surrender into the process will likely get the best outcomes. I think the ones
Mhm.
that are anxious about the process and feel compelled to intervene at various moments and try and manage the process, yeah, oftentimes I think the outcomes can be a bit compromised.
Mhm.
You don't pick your clients, right? Uh,
Right.
so 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 some are more interested in running their ideas through our process and being really excited about what's going to come. Others are anxious about where the process is going and therefore do intervene a lot. And I do think kind of it can compromise things to a degree. That's
Mhm.
okay. Not every project is a perfect expression of the process, right? Um, yeah, I mean, trust is a big part, and
Mhm.
a lot of times, I mean, we're very lucky. We are quite literally doing second homes for clients or expansions of homes for clients who we've done, or second buildings for developers. That's
Wow.
great. We've established
Yeah.
some trust in that. But that's only about, I don't know, 15-20% of our work. The rest of it is our first engagements with people.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And, why why would they walk into a relationship with total and complete faith?
Right.
I think that's just the reality of relationships and how they need to develop over time.
Yeah, it makes sense. How does R&D fit into all of this? That's something that feels unique to your firm.
Yeah, I think R&D, again, much like the core competencies you asked about earlier, R&D has a lot to do with a skill set that we developed to explore a thing that felt important to us,
Mhm.
and there wasn't anywhere else to go. Meaning that we were interested in exploring modular architecture, not because we think modular is the best. We had just built buildings, seen how chaotic and problematic the process was, and just wondered, like, is there a better way? And
Mhm.
of the
Mhm.
various potential better ways, is this one of the better ways? Let's explore that. But you got to be honest with yourself in the process. And we went ahead and designed a series of really compelling and ambitious modular projects and found that the industry was maybe not fully there yet. And maybe
Mhm.
there's some infrastructural limitations that needed to be amended to make some of these ideas more mainstream. So you got to do R&D at that point.
Right.
You have to develop solutions that don't currently exist in order to create the future that you want. And we've been blessed to have partners who've been able to support and come along with us to do some of that research work. But yeah, I think if architects are satisfied doing kind of one project one at a time and then taking a totally new challenge on and starting from scratch every time, that can be very compelling.
Mhm.
It can also be super frustrating too.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we as architects can change the world one building at a time. I think sometimes you can practice architecture and do one project at a time, and they can be meaningful and have a certain level of impact for a certain audience. But I do think if you do care about industrial change, infrastructural change, paradigmatic change, you do need to work at an R&D scale and have to have a brain for it. And not everyone likes R&D. I mean,
Yeah.
R&D means living in a world where there's a whole lot of variables at the same time. You don't get to control the volume of variables. You don't necessarily have a clear path.
Yeah.
You don't have a clear path, I should say. The time horizons are not very clear and specific. I mean, it's not like a regular project where there's like a start and a finish and there's funding and so forth. You're living in a nebulous and at times very anxiety-provoking world.
Yeah.
But if you have the tolerance for it, it's like an incredible itch to scratch in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's for me. Part of it is that like I don't know if I love any one of these things enough to do just one of them the rest of my life, and so at least I can be in the R&D space for some time. I can be in the filmmaking space for some time. I can be in the construction space. I can be in the art space. That like it's all very interesting. It's probably like horrendous for scalability and consistency, and certainly for cash flow, but I think it's more honest to the way my brain functions, candidly.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like architecture is a long game and the projects take forever. I used to work with an architecture firm, and they do take a very long time to complete. And clients do remember you for decades. How does brand building work in the long run? Building that so that your reputation is what you want it to be, not just in the public eye, but in the private sector.
Yeah, this is where I think I'm going to probably stumble on this question a little bit because I think my cognition and my awareness of our brand as something separate and apart from our work and process is not well developed.
Mm.
Yeah.
And we have, and just to be frank, we have gone through two independent kind of brand agencies coming in, doing the audit, rethinking the identity, discussing positions. So I'm not immune or I'm not naive about this as a thing. I just find it very difficult to think about the brand separate from the work. And
Right.
that's
Yeah.
a good or bad thing. I mean, to your point that these things take a very long time, and then
Yeah.
how do you manage those relationships in your brand? The time horizon of these projects is just the reality of them. It's like you can
Mhm.
design things as quickly as you want, but like you can't like swing a hammer at a different speed, right? Things must be built in the time that they're built. And when you
Right.
design complex things that are fabricated all over the world, like complex geometry and automated equipment, it can take even longer. So yeah, we are finishing projects. When I open up the server, you look at like the first communication. It's like, oh, that's 6 years ago. Good Lord.
Right.
How are we still on this project? And that's true. But I think from a brand standpoint, I tell the team that we need to be the adult in the room.
Mhm.
When there are frustrated clients and complicated GCs and consultants and you have these kind of this large symphony of participants to bring these projects to life, I would like us to be the ones that are telling the truth, are upfront about the practical realities of things, are honest about the circumstances. I say to my team constantly, like, be a journalist, don't be a novelist. Like, it's
Mm.
not that I don't want your opinion, but I want us to start the conversation from a basis of shared facts, and then we'll figure out what the right
Right.
thing to do is.
Mhm.
Sometimes people will say, like, I really like this thing. And I'll be like, well, who cares what we like? What is the thing doing?
Right.
And then we can collectively describe and discuss, is it good or bad? So, I mean, I hope from a brand standpoint, our clients, while they see, you know, beautiful, interesting, complex architectural rigor, kind of amazing things that get built and designed, I do hope like the transparency and the honesty of the way we approach the work, I hope that transcends what the thing looks like. Because, our projects, they're long because sometimes they're late, right? Construction
Mhm.
is slow, complexities, problems happen. Like,
Right.
Right.
it's like people who build like multiple buildings will always say, I've done this 10 times before. I can't believe how complicated and messy this process is. And yet we continue doing it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's almost like if you're going to be in a project that is just like inherent to the project is going to be complexity and delay, well, then I think the best thing you can do, the best thing I think we should do is try and be kind of transparent and adult about it.
Yeah.
And I say that as if it's like obvious, but it's like not, because
Mhm.
it's not that common, to be honest with you. I think there's like a lot of shenanigans and a lot of kind of sloppy and poor communication, a lot of indirect communication that I see. And I think that I hope that's kind of tied to our brand more than how good the work looks or doesn't look.
Yeah. I
Mhm,
mean, the
mhm.
way that we think about brand is the experience that people have with you and your organization. And that's
Yeah.
driven by the behaviors and the culture. So you're really trying to influence the behaviors and the cultures of your team when you're saying things like be a journalist, not a novelist, which I love, first of all, as a directive. And I also really love how it's grounded in this idea of narrative. You're using the personas of narrative creation to emphasize the fact that the work that you're doing is a narrative, which I think is a beautiful way to emphasize the brand that you're trying to create. So I think that makes a ton of sense to me. Um, I think what I'm curious about is with this eclectic group, with these different kinds of projects, with their sometimes ambiguity, sometimes complexity, different time horizons, et cetera. How do you kind of gel the culture between different kinds of creative minds? Because it really feels like a lot of what you've brought together is a lot of different kinds of creative minds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. I think I'm trying to kind of live in the spirit of your question because my experience of it actually is that like, well, no, it's actually all the same.
Hmm.
That we approach it the same. Like
Okay,
when
that's
we are
fair.
working architecturally, we're dealing with the kind of broad design of the building, but we're zooming in and looking at the resolution of the detail, right?
Right.
And there's an important relationship at those two scales. When you're editing a film, you may be trying to think about like, oh, in the documentary, what story comes first? But you're
Right.
also really zoomed into the moment to make sure that cut works so there's impact, right?
Hmm.
That like you need to have a rigor that applies at multiple scales and you have to be able to be oscillating between those two scales all the time. And to me, like that's the rigor of the work in architecture. It's the rigor of the work in filmmaking. It feels it just feels candidly very natural for me in the way that we work. And so whether we're editing a writing piece or we're editing a film piece or we're working on an architectural detail, like the kind of criteria for determining the right move feels very very similar. I mean, I joke sometimes like one of my longest collaborators, she's like a brilliant writer, and we often find ourselves in client engagements that are kind of surprising because we start out here and they expand, and we were like, oh my, what are we doing over here? Like I'm sitting here in Minneapolis, just having shot a film with the CEO and the COO of KPMG, discussing a series of strategy issues. It's not really specifically at all architectural, to be frank, but
Hmm.
we found ourselves kind of the work evolves a little bit because I don't know. I think we're smart people who will apply a real process that is pretty transferable.
Right.
And so yeah, I think I don't feel like I speak in a different voice or with different criteria or different terms with the different practitioners in the practice. I think it's like the skill sets are weirdly in my mind aligned.
No, I think that makes sense because what you're talking about is the art of storytelling just across multiple
Mhm.
media, right?
That's
Whether the
right.
media is film or the media is a building or the media is a written story, it's still narrative, and that's
And
interesting as you apply
totally.
it to well, even the R&D. There's a narrative to the
Oh
R&D
yeah.
work that you're
Uh,
doing.
in some respects, narrative in R&D is more important because in the absence of a codified process, in the absence of something that's commercialized and set up, you need to have a story that's driving you. Like, what do we believe to be true about X, Y, and Z? What
Right.
do we believe are the problems that don't function? And let's test out a hypothesis. But a hypothesis is nothing more than a story. Like
Mhm.
it's like the act three turn. If this happens, we think this might happen, right?
Right.
Absolutely. And I think if any good story, any good film, it's like there is the structure, right? There is the framework. There's the beginning, middle, and end, right? There's a sort of understanding of sequence. Like
Mhm.
there's an understanding of tone. Like all those things apply to everything. I mean,
Yeah.
if those things are absent in a building, if it's just a white box you walk into, then it's not great.
Right. But if the building is, telling a story, if the building has an antagonist and a protagonist, and if it has the different acts, if it has a resolution that you're trying to get to, um, and the best stories have an underlying thesis. The going full circle back to how you start the
That's right.
process, every good story has a thesis underlying it,
Yeah.
and that's what you're ultimately trying to express through the story.
I just had, I mean, this is a very kind of random anecdote, but I was just sitting with actually some interns in the office who were doing this study, and they were showing me all these renderings of this space and this thing they were proposing, this like big move in this frame in this. And I was like, okay, I was like, put the like this is an elevator. You're coming out of the elevator into this space. There's a moment of arrival. And I was like, where you've set the camera to show me this rendering, um, that doesn't, like, you won't see that. Like, put the camera inside the elevator, open the elevator doors, design into that view because that's the
Mm,
moment of arrival.
right.
You have designed a thing that is actually not perceptible. And we
Mhm.
will have invested all of this kind of time and effort and millwork and lighting and all this stuff to produce a thing that will not have any perceptual weight to it because you literally optically won't see the thing you're seeing, right? So the moment of arrival is the thing you need to be designing into
Yeah.
because that's the sequence, that's the promenade, that's the story.
Yeah. I
Wow.
almost wonder, could the style of approach that you have in storytelling have worked as well prior to digital rendering and the ability to do 3D fly-throughs and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think what we're doing is it's obviously accelerated by the technology, but I think there were incredible graphite renderings that
Mm,
were dramatically rendered, taken from a specific angle, exaggerated a certain way to unpack a certain story. So no, I think we're just using the new tools to do a similar thing, which is to um, unpack the imperceptible, like make something that isn't real yet real,
right.
because
Mhm.
fundamentally our output is a series of instructions.
Hmm.
Like a building is not an architectural output ultimately is nothing but a series of construction documents that are legible only to a small group of people who can build the building.
Hmm.
The people who are paying for it, who are going to be in it, those drawings have no meaning. So the challenge to us is, how do you bring to life the experience, the intent of the experience a couple years before they're there?
Right.
And that experience isn't only this is what it will look like. The
Mhm.
experience is what will it feel like,
Right.
right? And that's where story comes in. Story becomes the way by which you can unpack the feeling of the space. I can show
Mhm.
you beautiful renderings, that's fine, but that doesn't necessarily finish the job in my opinion.
All that time as a filmmaker and a host, is there something that unlocked beyond we've been talking about narrative and story, and that's like an obvious connection. We're talking about framing and things like that, so it's obvious connection. Is there something a little less obvious that you've learned or borrowed from that space?
I mean, I think one of the big jobs, specifically hosting a TV show, was to go to a place that is like chaotic. It's like a gigantic multi-billion dollar construction site with lots of stuff going on, and make someone both understand and care.
Hmm.
You
Yes.
know, it's not visually done. Like, I don't have the finished thing behind me, so you don't get to have it. And then, in fact, you're seeing a guy hit a thing or build a thing or do a kind of a microcosmic moment.
Mhm.
My job in a lot of those instances was to say, let's explain the tension and the excitement of this moment. Let's understand how this moment participates in a really critical, say, formal part of the final building. And let's remind ourselves that this building has civic significance or national significance. So
Mhm.
it's like, how does the hammering of this nail relate to the identity of the country of Azerbaijan? And having to kind of remind myself that those small activities can be part of some broader whole. That's how I think the audience stayed involved with these little scenes hanging off the side of a building, even though the building won't be done for 3 years, right?
Right.
I found that as an experience and a sort of learning framework when we started making this big documentary about the World Trade Center. And
Mhm.
here it wasn't necessarily about like explaining one building, but it was like explaining, our response to 9/11.
Mhm.
It was really interesting to say, hey, every scene we shoot, I want there to be a death defying, amazing Herculean effort. Like, we're hanging some amazing steel. But I want to make sure the guy hanging the steel, his dad worked on the original Twin Towers.
Wow.
And his dad broke his back building the first Twin Towers and has been paralyzed. And so when the buildings went down, his dad losing his legs maybe meant nothing to him. And so
Mhm.
he was a bartender at the time of 9/11, went ahead and became an iron worker. And now he's hanging steel to rebuild the building that his dad worked on.
Wow.
And that piece of steel is critical in creating a twist in the building that geometrically is what remembers the form of the original towers, but also creates a new twist.
Hmm.
And so that piece of steel is tied to a story of a person, of a history, of a family, and it also has an engineering feat because it's high up and complicated and takes a lot of load, but it's at an angle because that angle forms something super critical and metaphorical about the form of the building. It's got to
Wow.
all be in there,
Right.
right? It's
Yeah.
all in there. And the truth is, it's always all in there. We just got to pull it out.
Right.
And so that to me, yes, that's like that anecdote is particularly rousing, and not every project will have that level of historicity and meaning and metaphor. But there's meaning and metaphor in everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
our job is just to identify it, pull it out, and present it to our clients in a way that they can participate with us.
I
And I
think
think that,
also, oh,
yeah, go
sorry.
ahead. No, please.
I think that also the ability to take architecture speak and bring it into layman's terms so that somebody who's not an architect, somebody who is not, inclined to think that way, either in construction, to make them feel something when you're on that show as a TV personality, like that's a gift. Did you have to did that come naturally to you, or was it something you had to intentionally work on explaining?
I mean, I think I've been like I was a state champion high school debater. Like I think
Okay,
communication and the ability to express myself as it was a God given trait for which I'm very
right.
lucky. And so that was a sort of fully loaded skill. Thank God. I think where I had been, I think, called to push that skill is that I happen to find myself interested in something that is kind of esoteric,
Mm.
Mhm.
and that's maybe cool. I don't know. I don't want to be alone. I want to connect to people. I want the work
Yes.
that I do to be connective and sticky. And so I just found myself in grad school learning how to speak in a way that just so pretentious and so
Right.
isolating and so disconnected from the people who use these buildings. Like it
Yeah.
was like we'd been anointed into this little club of geniuses who could talk and build and make these things, and the people who went into our buildings couldn't speak our language. Like
Correct.
that's not victory to me. That's failure. It's not even failure.
Mhm.
It's just sadness. It just doesn't feel like I'm connected. Like I want people to care about the stuff that I do because I want the stuff that I do to be engaged with.
Mm.
I
I
love
mean,
that.
and so like yeah, so learning the skill to communicate the stuff to laymen, yes, it's a skill. I certainly acknowledge that, and I think I'm particularly good at doing that. But I do it because I care about having an audience who can be with me
Yeah, you
and
can
be
see
with the
that.
work.
Yeah.
It's like I mean, you can watch you can watch amazing practitioners in very very specific fields of science and what have you, and they're speaking to a very small audience. You can marvel in their brilliance, but you can't always come along for the ride.
Right.
And I'm interested in people coming along for the ride, whether it's an audience or a client. Like I want them with us, and that means you got to talk to them in
Yeah.
a way
Mhm.
that's compelling. Not even I don't even say talk down to them because I always tell my team talk at the top of your intelligence. Assume that like every client understands what we're talking about. Assume that they're brilliant, but also give them a doorway in.
Mhm.
Right. Mhm.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
mean, the worst thing I find that some people do, architects and other professionals, is they use a technical expertise as a defense mechanism.
Mm.
Mm.
Right.
Someone asks a question and they say, like, well, it's quite complicated, really, but because of X, Y, and Z, and this goes in here, and this, so we can't do the thing. It's like, maybe that's true, but like, maybe you don't want to grapple with the question and you're deflecting with expertise.
Mhm.
Like, don't do that. That's
Yeah.
shitty, right? Like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Right. Build that connection. Don't put up walls.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and if you do that, you actually, I think, afford yourself the honesty to say, like what you're proposing doesn't work, and I'm gonna show you why it doesn't work.
Right.
Mhm.
In a way
As
you can
opposed to
understand.
yeah, as opposed to your doctor, you're like, "Oh, well, is that okay?" It's like, "No, don't do it, it's bad." It's like, "Oh, okay, well," and now we can sit with, AI and be like, "Oh, yeah? Well, actually, I'm gonna push back."
Right.
Right.
And,
Right.
so you can walk into your doctor's office and kind of be in the mix with them. And I've had clients do the same thing with AI with me in meetings too, and that's fine,
Right.
That's fine. Get
They're
sit
becoming
sit with
more
us.
educated.
Yeah, get into the mix.
Right.
If we know what we're talking about and we're honest, we can say like that does or doesn't work,
Right.
whether you
Right.
think it's a good or a bad idea. But let's put it on the table and talk about it together and not push it away.
I
Well,
love that.
at the beginning of the conversation, we talked a little bit about building trust as being central to bringing clients along in the process. And it sounds like what we've just been talking about is fundamental to building trust. It's not talking down to them. It's bringing them in. It's the transparency that you've talked about. Is there other elements to that trust building early in the process that you think about?
Yeah, I don't know if this is specific to architecture, but I think accountability is pretty important.
Sure.
I think acknowledging when you're wrong, and I think acknowledging when we've made mistakes. I think in architecture, like medicine, a lot of other things, like liability is a real risk, and you got to be very cautious about that
Hmm.
because there's lawsuits, there's things falling apart, there's life safety, there's real stuff.
Right.
Um, but I think if you work seriously around the kind of the serious stuff, the safety stuff, and you're very you do the right thing on those issues, yeah, I think you can carve out space to be wrong and to admit that you're wrong.
Right.
And I think that's important. I've it's cost us money, frankly, but like there's a problem on site, something's happened, something's been identified as an issue. You go on site, and I will ask the question, like, was it in the drawings? Did we document it? If we missed it, then it's a miss. It's on us. Then we may
Right.
be cutting a check because something's wrong because we screwed it up. We missed a thing because we miss things, and that happens
Right.
because we're humans, right?
Right.
Or was it in the drawings and the GC missed it and they did it incorrectly? Okay, but let's not. This isn't about finger pointing. It's like, okay, so what's the most expedient path to getting the thing remedied? How can we participate in helping with the solution? I think this other thing, where you have this thing where you have like whether it's the architect versus the builder or whatever, the sort of
Yes.
the designer versus the fabricator, like that whole diagram is so stupid. Like to set up a kind of intrinsically oppositional relationship to the people who are executing your work is so weird to me. Like this idea that like, oh, the architect's coming to site, they're going to start pointing out all the mistakes. It's like, that's not our job.
Mm.
Why don't we preemptively work with the contractor to really design things in such a way so they have full ownership over the design too,
Right.
so they
Mhm.
care about it too. Yeah, so I think so if it's not in the drawings, it's not in the drawings. It's our fault. And if there's a cost to remediation, depending on the cost, we're gonna sit in that conversation and we're gonna own our mistakes because
Right.
that's the cost of doing what we do. And I think that builds a lot of trust. When
Yeah.
there's a
Yes.
big problem and people are stressed out, and I sit in the meeting saying like, "Yeah, we missed it. It's really unfortunate. We were going really fast trying to meet a schedule, and we went too fast, and our QA didn't catch it, and it's a mistake. And we're
Mhm.
going to work really hard to mitigate the cost of the remediation. And if the cost is excessive, we may participate in that remediation. And that's really uncomfortable, and we're going to learn something from this mistake."
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's
I don't
great.
Well,
know.
I think that the weight of building a building that like what you said, like it's a huge deal. You're dealing with people's lives. Like people are going to live in these spaces, so you have to make the building have integrity and stand up and stay standing. And that's a lot of weight. And so like if you mess up on something, being able to admit that you did something wrong, while hopefully you'll get the client back, but if not, you still have your integrity. And I think that that is huge and that is part of your brand.
And just, full disclosure, there are mistakes that we've made that, whether we own them or not, I think the clients believe that those mistakes shouldn't have been made, and
Yeah.
we won't be working with them again because they think
Right.
that we'd fallen below the what was expected. And that also happens too, and that's like a big disappointment. But
Yeah.
then what happens? What do you do after that? It's like, okay,
You
what in our process was missing that allowed that to happen? How does it not
Mhm.
happen again?
Yeah.
learn from it.
Yeah, expensive learning experience.
Mhm.
And that's okay. Those bumps and bruises are valuable and they're
Well,
memorable.
that's
And
life.
yeah, totally. I mean, there's
I
nothing.
mean,
Yeah,
nobody's
exactly.
perfect. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, like I joked that we were just filming today, like the sound man, right? Like no one ever compliments the sound man. The only time you acknowledge the sound man if there's a problem with the sound,
Right.
right?
right.
So a sound man's expected performance is perfection, right?
Wow.
That you hear the sound and there's no issues with the audio. The only time you identify the sound man if there's a problem, right?
Mhm.
That's a tough bar. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
It's a hard thing about their profession. I think to some degree the expectations are similar with what we do,
Hmm.
and I think we got to disabuse people of that.
Right.
Like we are humans. There's a billion
Mhm.
details that we could draw to describe the building perfectly for the contractor. The
Yes.
fee and the time in our lives only allow for 50% of those things to be drawn. this is an inherently imperfect exercise.
Right.
And we're going to
Mhm.
work really, really hard to manage that imperfection.
Yeah.
And, you know,
And at the end of it,
Godspeed, right?
you're right. And at the end of it, the goal is that story that it comes out, bringing
Yeah.
it all full circle. Danny,
Yeah.
this has been an amazing conversation. I could talk to you for
Yeah.
another hour, but I know you have things to do. Um, where can our guests find you online or see the next production?
Yeah. Work-wise, you can always go to our website, just dannyforster.com. You can see some architecture work and the film work and the TV work and some of the R&D work. On Instagram, I believe we are Danny Forster AND Architecture. That's our handle there, and you can see some of our work being posted there. Um, Work that's coming on the horizon. I will say this won't be for another year or so, but there'll be a big documentary about a very significant project in Azerbaijan coming out next year.
I'm
And
excited.
Yeah.
yeah, that'll be really cool. And then hopefully we're going to be kicking off. This is not announced or even fully baked yet, but we'll be doing a new TV program coming out
Oh,
about
wow.
architecture and communities, and so that's being developed as well. But fundamentally, the work at the practice is like active and ongoing. We've got an amazing hospital for dogs in Koh Samui, Thailand, under construction right now, which you should check out.
Awesome.
Um, we have some incredible residential projects that we're just finishing up that are just really kind of groundbreaking. In a few months, God willing, we're going to be breaking ground on what will be the first commercial expression of this R&D, this multi-year R&D effort that you and I have a shared client over.
Yeah.
That will be happening in Maryland. So there's lots of incredible and diverse outputs that this kind of cool company that we get to be a part of is making. And yeah, it's fun.
That's
It's hard,
awesome.
but it's fun.
Yeah, that's good.
Is there a book or a podcast that you recommend?
Oh man, I have 2 kids under 2, so there's not a lot in the world of culture or really anything other than work and my kids that I know about. A podcast I can recommend. This isn't there. This is the truth. This is the truth. I'm in
You want
full
that.
kid parenting mode. I got nothing. I got
That's
nothing
okay.
to offer. We're trying to stay alive. I try to keep my baby sleeping at night. My partner is managing a whole bunch of chaos at home. So we are in baby mode and still trying to execute at the office. And I think
Yeah.
that alone, candidly, has been a pretty heavy lift.
That's the
It
real
is.
world. But I think for our listeners, definitely go back and check out the past episodes of Danny's show. It's amazing. You'll learn a lot about the built environment and experience the world of architecture through the eyes of a storyteller who is also an architect. So, Danny, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us. We really, really appreciate it.
Fun. Thank you both. I really appreciate the time, and I look forward to hearing this.
Awesome. Well, folks, that wraps up another episode of the Intangible Brand. If you found value in today's conversation, I know I did, please take a moment to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us to continue to bring these kinds of conversations to folks like you.
Right. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and like. You can even comment. It just brings our information to the right people, like you said.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode or any of our episodes. Feel free to leave a review or share your feedback or your questions with us. Tell us what you'd like to hear about next time. You can always reach us at hello@theintangible.brand.com.
You can also see us on LinkedIn and theintangible.brand.com for more resources and information about the show.
So thanks for joining us on The Intangible Brand. And remember, the strongest brands are built on the experiences they create, both for their clients and their teams.